Hi everyone, my name is Zach. I'm from Soroffa Laurier Secondary School. So my peers and I were discussing and deliberating here, and well, actually we don't believe we're on the right track as of now, and that we may not be focusing on the largest issue when and in our battle against ISIS, because it is a big battle. And hundreds of thousands of people dying as of now in Syria because of Daesh. And well, firstly, I'd like to say ISIS is using the internet as a catalyst to make our Canadians and our peers, to make an environment conducive of aggressiveness. So what our group would like to do is maybe focus more on our own youth, rather than focusing on ISIS and trying to battle them on their own grounds because they've chosen to use media. We could focus on our own youths. Our youth, as Sir you mentioned earlier, may already be somewhat aggressive or may be looking for some environments to enhance and to possibly enforce their fantasies, their aggressions, and whatsoever. And in the battle against ISIS, I think we should focus maybe more on the greater issues when dealing with ISIS. First of all, what is ISIS? Where is ISIS? What exactly are we fighting? Because truly we haven't exactly identified what ISIS is. As of February 2014, decided to go to Iraq or Syria to join ISIS. How many was that?
The definite stats aren't known. There's definitely been at least 60.
Middle East, but for a lot of people, that's all they know. So when we hear news articles and see ads on TV that say don't do this stuff, don't talk to them, we don't really know what not to talk to, who to block, what to recognize as hate that ties into this. And that leads to, on human faults, gives people a lot of curiosity, especially young people, and that's
So if everybody could just get together and we'll make our way to the next location. Okay, can we just stay down there? Can we stay down in the pit?
activity. We'll have time to talk about it later. But I'm going to be reading a series of statements. When you hear them, interpret it as you will, and then either stand up or raise your hand if for you it's true. That's all. Pretty easy instructions. So the first one is, were you on Facebook today or Snapchat? If you were, either stand up or raise your hand. Look around. Now put your hands down. What about if you had dinner at home last night? Did you have dinner at home last night? Take a look around. Now put your hands down. Now, what if your tongue can curl? Like this. Can you do it? Take a look around. Now put your hands down. What if you have naturally curly hair? Hey. Me too. Take a look around. Now put your hands down. What if you've ever felt proud of your culture? No. Take a look around. Now put your hands down. If you've ever felt proud of your culture. Now put your hands down. Thank you. What if you've ever felt judged or teased for something you couldn't change about yourself? Take a look around. Now put your hands down. What about if you've ever felt embarrassed about not being able to do something that other people can do? Take a look around. Now put your hands down. What if you've seen racism or discrimination in your school community? Take a look around. Hands straight up if you have. You have to be able to see each other. Now put your hands down. Thank you. Now put your hand up if you have a good friend. If you have a good friend, put your hand right up. Take a look around. Thank you. Now put them down. Now, what if you think that you've been a good friend to someone else? That's great. Take a look around. Now put your hands down. Put your hand up if you've ever felt supported by your friends or family. This is great. You all have great communities. Put your hands down now. Thank you. What about if you've ever supported a friend? Excellent. You're all really great people. Put your hands down. Put your hand up if you believe that there's something you as an individual can do to stop the instances of racism or discrimination that you said you've seen in your school community. Do you think you can do something about it? Maybe, maybe not. Do you think so? Put your hand up. Thank you. Take a look around. Now put your hands down. So, that's it. I have no more statements. Thank you all for participating in that. So, well, I guess it's not that early in the morning. So, how did that activity make you feel? Were there any times that you felt maybe uncomfortable raising your hand? How did it feel when you had to make a decision about whether to raise your hand or not? About whether you did or did not agree with any of the statements I was making? Maybe sometimes it felt like you weren't sure, or maybe you knew right away, yes, I agree with that. Hand right up. There are differences depending on the statement, depending on whether that statement's something you can choose to do, like whether you were on Facebook or Snapchat today, or something you maybe can't choose to do, like whether or not your hair is curly, or whether or not you've ever seen something happen around school or in your community. Different things for different things. Think about some time that someone else put their hand up, but you didn't. How did that make you feel? You weren't included in that statement, and you were excluded. Sometimes it was something really simple, like whether or not you had dinner at home last night or not. Other times it wasn't so simple. How did that make you feel, even if just for a moment? Think about that. So this activity, if you haven't already figured it already, because you're a smart bunch, is designed to help us think about what it means to be included or excluded. and the difference in that feeling about whether it's something you have a choice about or when it's something that you don't. And the things that we don't have a choice about when we do get excluded is what Bernie's going to come talk to you about now.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good morning. So, just to let you know, I live in Toronto now. I was born and bred here in Ottawa. I went to elementary school here in Ottawa, Osgood Street Public School. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. I went to high school here in Ottawa. Whoever has heard of Hillcrest High School? All right, my school. I can still sing the school song, but I won't do that because you'll run out of the room screaming. We're going to talk this morning about hate activity in this city, my city, the city I was born in, the city I was brought up in. And I'm going to ask you some very pointed questions, and there's no right answers, and there are no right answers, and wrong answers. They're just answers. It wasn't all that long ago that anti-Semitism, anti-black hatred, and Islamophobia made an unwelcome and sad familiar reappearance here in the nation's capital. We were all witness to an unprecedented number of vile racist attacks. So let me remind you what these attacks were. The first attack occurred at the Kehilat Beth Israel in the West End, probably Ottawa's largest synagogue, and probably one of the largest in the country. The second attack targeted a small glebe area Jewish minyan at a private home. So a minyan, Jews, like our cousins in the Islamic faith, we pray 3 times a day. Muslims pray 5 times a day. And we need to pray in community. That's part of the Jewish tradition. And so if you can't find a synagogue, there's sometimes these private homes that hold a minyan. And minyan means 10, because you have to pray in groups of 10. And a hate monger sprayed the private home of a glebe minyan with swastikas and terrible anti-Jewish epithets. The third attack, and this was personal, was against the Marziki Hadass synagogue, actually not too far from here in Alta Vista. Why do I say it's personal? This is a synagogue that I went to as a child. This is a synagogue where I had my bar mitzvah. This is a synagogue where my wife and I were married. This is a synagogue where I buried both my mother and my father. And to see anti-Semitic slogans painted across the door with big giant Nazi swastikas literally broke my heart. The fourth place of worship to be hit was the Parkdale United Church in the West End. There, Pastor Andrew Bailey has become renowned for his passionate work, helping those less fortunate, and his courage in standing up for human and civil rights. Pastor Bailey is black. And the final attack was against the Soloway Jewish Community Center, at which time the alleged culprit, a youthful offender, he was 17 years old, was apprehended. The vile slogans, the evil symbols, though were not, it appears, the work of somebody who was only marginally familiar with hate. This alleged offender drew a perfect swastika. If anybody, you can see the swastikas in this picture right here. These are not easy to draw, to get them perfect. Sometimes they're straight up, sometimes they're on a wrong angle. You have to know what you're doing when you're drawing a swastika like that. The epithets and the slogans he wrote, scrawled, spray paint, steeped in hate would have a familiarity with. So while the alleged offender might be young in years, he is mature in his hate. So it's not an unfair question to ask where he learned this hateful bile. Before I continue, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Bernie. I am the Executive Director of the Mosaic Institute, and I am the son of a Holocaust survivor. My late father, Max Farber, was brought up in a small Polish village before the war. There were 750 Jews that lived in that village, 800 non-Jews, Christians, Catholics. They didn't get along all that well together, but they kind of all kept to themselves until September 1st, 1939. Does anybody know why that date is so important? September 1st, 1939? Who takes Canadian history? Yes. What's your first name? Colin. Stand up. Tell me why it's important. The Nazis, it was a really weird coming together of the Nazis on one hand and the communists on the other hand, and of course that thing was all broken down within 2 years. But Poland was invaded. The Nazis, who had a homicidal view of Jews, and you heard about that earlier this morning, came into my father's village. They created a small ghetto where they imprisoned the Jewish community within 2 streets. Overcrowding, dysentery, hunger. And within a year, the Nazis liquidated that ghetto. They placed everybody into cattle cars. They took them to the Treblinka death camp. My father was able to jump out of the moving train, saving his life. All the others from that village, all the Jews in that village, were murdered in the gas chambers of Treblinka. My father was the only Jewish survivor of that town. So I get it. I was brought up in the shadow of the Holocaust. I understand it. When I went to school here in this city, it's not like today. I look around this room. This is a great room. People from all walks of life, different colors, different nationalities, different faiths. When I went to school, it was pretty white bread, this city. I was one of only 3 Jews in my elementary school at Osgood Street Public School, and one of only 4 Jews in my entire high school. And I'm going to get back to that later on this morning to talk a little bit about what that meant to me and how that affected me personally. So getting back to what's been happening here in this country. Earlier this year, one evening, a number of Canadian Muslims did what they always do. They gathered for evening prayers at a local mosque in Quebec City. The evening was murderously shattered when allegedly André Bissonnette, a young 29-year-old, entered the prayer room, shooting at those in prayer without regard to a thing. 6 Canadian Muslims were slain. In other words, fathers were no longer coming home to their children. Husbands were no longer coming home to their wives. Brothers were no longer coming home to their sisters and brothers. Wiped out in the flash of an eye, simply because they were of the Muslim faith. It was, my friends, the first time in Canadian history that such an event occurred at a house of worship. And it's further alleged that this assailant, this murderer, this terrorist, yeah, I know when you hear the word terrorist, you think of something else, but this was a terrorist. He committed terror against the Muslim community. It is alleged that he had ties to the racist right, to white supremacy, to neo-Nazism, and I'm sure we're going to find out when it all comes to trial. And I think that one of the things that we are going to find out is that he learned his hatred in a very interesting place. Hazard a guess. What's your name? Declan. But I know there is another place that he picked it up where any of you can go right now on your iPhones if you want to do it. Where will you learn it? What's your name?
Armin.
Armin. I know an Armin. It's not you though. Where?
The internet.
The internet. The internet. Parents? Probably. Don't know. We'll find out. But surely the internet. That's probably where he heard and learned most of his racism. So today, this morning, we're gathered here for really 2 purposes. First and foremost, we want to work together in solidarity in dealing with abhorrent expressions of hatred. Our former Attorney General here in Canada, and probably Canada's most renowned human rights expert, Irwin Cotler, the Honorable Irwin Cotler, I think he said it best when he said, and I'll quote him, "Let there be no mistake about it. Indifference and inaction always mean coming down on the side of the victimizer and never on the side of the victim. In the face of evil," Mr. Cotler says, "indifference is acquiescence, if not complicity, in evil itself." Our second reason is to determine how best to inoculate ourselves against the virus of hate and intolerance. And it is a virus. It comes in every generation. And sometimes we find an inoculation, and it lasts for a bit, but it always makes a return because hatred can be muscular. So the question we're posing this morning is, how do we remain vigilant? How do we fill the glass of what I used to call tolerance, but I'm not going to call it tolerance anymore. I don't want to be tolerated. Like, do you want to be tolerated for the color of your skin? Do you want to be tolerated because you have accessibility issues? You don't want to be tolerated. What do you want to be? You want to be? Ah, thank you. Fully accepted. So let's call this glass, instead of the glass of tolerance, I'm tripping over this thing, let's call it the glass of acceptance. So the question is, how do we fill the glass of acceptance so that it spills over? And to me, the answer lies in education, exactly what we're doing here this morning. Now, it's not like the be-all and the end-all, right? Education isn't everything, believe me. But it remains our last best hope for improving, really, the quality of our lives, for filling the glass of acceptance, and for banishing hatred from our midst. So there are 5 key lessons that I think we have to learn. But before we do so, I want to go back to my days here as a young person, both in high school and prior to that in elementary school. And many of you here will kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about. Putting yourself into the shoes of a victim, understanding that words have power, understanding what feelings mean. I don't think a day went by when I was in elementary school, that would be like grade 1 to grade 6, because Osgood Street School only went up to grade 6. Then I ended up at Vincent Massey Public School for grade 7 and 8, and then I ended up at Hillcrest. And I don't think a day went by that I didn't have to face the anger and the hurt of being called anti-Semitic names. Dirty Jew, Christ killer, and other even worse. And as I said, there are very few other Jews that I could relate to in that school. And there's this one situation that happened when I was in grade 10. Some of you may be able to relate to this. We used to have gym 3 times a week. Do you have it 3 times a week still, or just once a week now? We were in better shape than you guys were. And the guys would go down to the locker room. We'd have to change into our shorts and put on our jock strap and our, everything else, right? And I remember this one day, I was a pretty puny kid, I have to tell you. And this one kid, his name's Michael, came up to me and really started hassling me, calling me all the names you just heard. Started to scratch a little swastika into the hook, where I hung my clothes. Started yelling for everybody to come on over and take a look at the scrawny little Jew. And I was like this close from breaking down into tears. I was 15 years old. I was in a room full of guys. You could have imagined what that would have meant had I broken into tears in front of everybody. My career in high school would have been finished. Then out of nowhere shows up Peter Zwolski. So you guys say, who's Peter Zwolski, right? Who's Peter Zwolski? Peter Zwolski was a captain of the football team. He was like really this great guy. Everybody liked Peter. And Peter said something that day that I never forgot. And much of the rest of the class, and me. And he said, in this class, we're all the same. I don't care if we're black or red or green or yellow or purple, we're all the same. I've never forgotten that. It was a powerful, powerful lesson for me. Not because he took my side, but because he opened my eyes to what it meant to be a hero, to what it meant to show courage, to what it meant to be bold and to stand shoulder to shoulder with your friend in his time of need. So let's go over the lessons. There are 5 key lessons that I've sort of distilled over the last number of years. And the first one is that the tapestry of a society unravels from its edges, and that the strength of a society is determined by its willingness to defend the rights of individuals who are least able to defend themselves. Kind of like what Peter Zawalski did for me. Well, that's kind of a fancy words, right? Tapestry of society unravels, blah, blah, blah. What do you think that quote means? What does that quote mean to you? That society unravels at its edges. There's no right answers, there are no wrong answers, but tell me what you think that means to you. And if nobody puts up their hand, I will ask you directly. Like, for example, hey, everybody has their heads down, don't ask me, don't ask me. But really, these are just questions. I'm just curious as to what you think about you. What's your name? Come here. I'm not going to embarrass you, I swear, honestly. So what do you think that means, you know, that society can unravel at its edges? Take it again. You guys know? Come on. What does that mean? Eric. Yeah, what does that mean to you? There's no just your. What do you see up there? Right. And what are the colors there? Right, a rainbow. Kind of like in this room, right? Yeah. So if it unravels, what happens?
It's broken.
Ah! Here's a smart, that's it. It's cool. This is who we are as Canada. We are this great rainbow now, this great multicultural nation. We're black and we're yellow and we're green and we're purple and we're white and we're of all faiths, Christian and Muslim and Mormon and Hindu and Sikh. This is our tapestry. But it begins to unravel at the edges. And unless there's a Peter Zawalski around that can help stop that from unraveling, we can run into problems. Let's go on to number 2. Number 2, while societies demonstrate a certain internal consistency in selecting their victims, any group is given the right circumstances, any group, so think back to the activity that you did earlier with Rachel. At any time, any one of you could have been included or excluded depending on the statement that was read. It means that any one of us have at one time or another been included or excluded in something. We've all felt included when you're with your friends and you feel part of that group. But there are times, like in that locker room, that I felt very excluded. There was another time at Hillcrest High School that I felt very excluded. And some of you who are with minority groups or part of this diverse sort of multicultural experiment that is wonderfully Canada, you'll get what I mean when I tell you this story. So I was in grade 10 in English class. We were studying a little-known English writer by the name of William Shakespeare. Do you still study Shakespeare in high school? You do, right? So we were taking this play called The Merchant of Venice. How many people know have heard of The Merchant of Venice? Show me by hands. Okay. So you will know that the evil character in The Merchant of Venice, does anybody know his name? Yep. Shylock. And Shylock is? Jewish. Shylock is a Jew. And he's not a very nice guy. And the way we used to study English, I hope you don't do it this way, or at least it's not done particularly like this. I had an English teacher who just retired a few years ago, so I'm not going to mention his name because there's some teachers in the room who probably know who he is. He was a nice guy. He meant well. And of course, when you study Shakespeare, you're given parts, right? Okay, you play Antonio, and you play Jessica, and you play Portia. And then he's going around like this, and he said, Bernie, you're Jewish. You'll play Shylock. Shit, I don't want to play Shylock. That's the last person I want to play. I felt centered out, and I was really upset. And I went home, spoke to my dad. My dad was a Holocaust survivor. And I told him the story. I was like, really angry. And he said, calm down. He says, and he had this wonderful Yiddish accent. It was wonderful. He said, you know what? You're going to be the best Shylock Hillcrest High School has ever seen. So I said, really? So we studied together. And we read together. And I had that great soliloquy that's in The Merchant of Venice. Everybody will remember. Hath not a Jew eyes? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you poison us, do we not die? It's a wonderful soliloquy. It was the only piece in The Merchant of Venice that actually humanizes the Jew Shylock. I studied, and there I was in class. And everybody was reading their part, and then it came to me. I was great. Hath not a Jew eyes? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And the room was silent. And my teacher said, that's pretty good. Next time, do you think you could put a little Jewish accent on like your father had? True story. That's called isolating. I don't think he meant it in a bad way. I actually think he probably meant it in a way. It doesn't matter. There was nothing good about that. There was nothing good about that because he refused to put himself into my shoes to understand what it was like for me as a young Jewish boy, the only Jew in high school. The third lesson. We have to understand that victims have to be separated from the larger society before they can be discriminated against. This process begins with words that dehumanize, that leads to acts of state that lop off, civil protections that citizens should be enjoying, and can culminate in physical destruction. And you heard the representative today from the Montreal Holocaust Center speak about the history of what happened that led to the Holocaust. Now, I should tell you that in my community, in the Jewish community that I come from, we tend not to use the term Holocaust anymore. Does anybody know why? Because Holocaust was originally coined by a Jewish philosopher by the name of Elie Wiesel, who wanted a particular word that best emoted and described the murder of 6 million innocent people. And so, Holocaust, which comes from the Greek meaning to burn in fire, was coined by him. But sadly, because the English language is so versatile, that word started to be misused. It was used by the anti-abortion community. It was used by various other communities. The worst I ever heard it being used was during a Super Bowl game. I can't remember who was playing at the time, but one team was losing really badly. And the commentator said, my goodness, it's a real Holocaust out there in the field. So we stopped using it, and we coined our own term, show up. It's a Hebrew term, meaning destruction. Show up. And we use that term now in order to describe our narrative, the Jewish narrative. Now, others who have gone through genocide have also coined their own term. The Roma people in Europe also were murdered mercilessly by the Nazis. It is said that the Roma and the Jews marched in shoulder to shoulder into the gas chambers. And they called their genocide the Paranos, the fire. The Armenian genocide, Armenians, they refer to their genocide as the Mishreged, the killing. We create our own narratives because they are our stories. So, we have to understand, as I said, that victims have to be separated. And as I said earlier, the process begins with words. Words have such tremendous power. They have the power to dehumanize. They have the power to hate. So what are some of the words or ideas, I'm not talking about swear words now, but specific insults, subtle words. Can anyone think of subtle examples of words and phrases that can dehumanize? Somebody in the last session came up with a really good word right away, and I'm just curious. Who said that? Say it again, stand up. Terrorist. Terrorist. What do you think of when you hear the word terrorist? And let's be honest, what do you think of when you hear the word terrorist?
Brown people.
Brown people. Specifically, Muslims. But you heard at the very beginning of my talk, when I talked about this guy, Andrei Visanek, what did I call him? I called him a terrorist. A terrorist is a person who commits terror. It's not associated with Muslims. It's not associated with Jews. It's not associated with anybody. It's associated with people who commit acts of terror. But in our heads, right? In our minds, we think about these connections. And we have to purposely stop thinking like that. We have to change mindsets. You know, when you think of immigrant communities, and you think of, oh, immigrants, they go into low-skilled jobs in Canada. How many people have heard that expression before? Immigrants going into low-skilled jobs. You know something? Many of the immigrants that come here, and refugees, some of them have been trained in other countries. Syria, Africa, Sierra Leone, it doesn't matter. As a rabbi, as a teacher. But when he came here, he had nobody. He had to start all over again. He had no grief counselors. He had himself. And he became a grocer, owned a small grocery store. Now, he was lucky. As you know, today you go to the airport and see we are pleased to serve you in one of our two official languages, English and French. My father spoke 8 official languages because he came from Europe. So he spoke Yiddish, he spoke Polish, he spoke Russian, he spoke German. He taught himself French and English when he got here. And he had a sign on his cash register that says, "I will serve you in," and he listed all the languages that he could speak. And he learned French on the job. And the French kids, the French Canadian kids that came to our store, they learned how to swear in Yiddish. And there are a group of French Canadian kids my age today, whom I still meet now and again, who when they see me, they say a Jewish swear word, which I won't say here today. Your father taught me that. That's what's so great about Canada. But words do have this incredible kind of power. And we must be careful about it. Number 4. Conventional morality breaks down in the absence of identification with the victim. So what are some conventional ideas or actions that are acceptable when applied to one group, but not another? So can you think of some actions that we do here in Canada that sometimes target one group, but don't target others? Who can think of some? Think of one. Are you thinking of one? Yeah, stand up. Okay, think of one. Tell me one. Have you ever been carded? No? Anybody here been carded? Ever? Yes. Yes? Who said yes? You've been carded? You're kidding. That's different. In Toronto, does anybody know what carding means? Yeah? Who wants to tell me what carding is? Who knows? Yeah. Stand up. What is it? Yeah. Police will come up to you for no reason at all. It's a big problem in Toronto, big cities. And they say, give me your ID. For no reason. Guess who gets carded the most in Toronto? Gets carded the most. Who do you think gets carded the most? Would I get carded? Why? I'm an old guy, right? They don't care what I do. Would you get carded?
Yes.
Why?
Because I'm young and black.
You got it. Young black kids get carded 80% more than anybody else. That's one example. There are other examples on an airplane. All of you, right? What happens at the airport? Has anybody here felt that they've been specially selected at the airport? Right? Okay, let's go over here. What's your name? Don't know your name? And what happened to you? Okay. Why did they're waiting in line. You know how often I've been chosen to have like a pat down or to go for special in all the years that I've traveled? Maybe twice. I have a Muslim friend who gets chosen every year, approximately. Because we've got these stupid stereotypes in our head. It's a common stereotype that our own government somehow exploits, right? We have to find ways to change that, while at the same time understanding our needs. Simple. What about religious foundation? Situation happening in Peel region right now, outside of Toronto. A group of Muslim students go to a high school in Toronto, and at noon, they're mandated to pray. The Ontario Human Rights Act has a law that basically says that Ontario has to accommodate religion. And so they're given a small room. It's called a Juma. Is that correct? Who can help me out here? Juma? Is that right? No? What are the prayers called?
Yes.
Juma, yeah. And they go and they pray. Doesn't hurt anybody, doesn't mean anything. But there's this huge debate in Peel region. Why are special accommodations being given to Muslim students? Well, I'm going to tell you something. You know that special accommodations are being given to Christian students? What are they? What are they? Yes.
Having holidays off.
Yeah, like what? Christmas. I don't celebrate Christmas. But I was forced to take Christmas off. As a matter of fact, when I was in public school, I played Joseph in a Christmas play. It's a true story. Like Joseph in a Christmas play. I thought I was great. I remember, I don't know how much time I have. I'm going to tell another. Okay, one last story. So I was at the Bay. You know the Bay? It used to be called Freeman's. It was owned by a Jewish family called Freeman's. And at Christmas time, they had this great show window. It was fantastic. They had toys and everything. Which was then Freeman's, through to Toyland to Santa Claus. True story. And I was Jewish. I wasn't supposed to go see Santa Claus, right? Another way that I felt excluded. But I thought I was 10 years old, I was there, and the heck with it. I'm going to go see Santa Claus. I want to ride on this train. I'm going to do this. And I got on the train, and my heart was going boom, boom, boom. I thought there was going to be like a lightning bolt was going to come and strike me, right? And I'm waiting. To say, and he pulls his beard out and says, "Hey, boy, it's me, your keeper." The role in the authorization, the mobilization, and the rationalization. Have you heard rhetoric or ideas rationalizing hateful activity? Has anybody here heard such ideas before? Have you heard people say what? What have you heard people say?
Just the word other people do that.
Yes, other people. Yeah, it goes on and on. Why does there's no and that hate, and that we have to find a way and the rationalization of evil. So as I conclude, and we look towards the future, we can't be complacent. like Peter Zwolski. Did I tell the story of Peter Zwolski? I did, right? The locker room story. Gotta be like Peter. It's easier to, by the way, all the other guys in that locker room, they turn their backs. Easy to do. Peter. When crackpots walk into houses of worship and feel more honest. Story about Rabbi Chaim. Poland in the 1800s. And he tells the story as follows. He says, I once went to heaven and hell. Row after row of tables laden with platters of wonderful, sumptuous food. Yet people, they were emaciated, they were moaning with hunger. He says, I came close. Every person had food, but their arms were splinted with wooden slats. So they couldn't bend their elbow to bring the food, this great food, to their mouths. The rabbi said, it broke my heart. I heard the tortured moans and the groans of these poor people as they held their food, but they couldn't eat. Then he said, I went to heaven. I see him setting that I saw in hell. Row after row. In contrast to hell, the people here in heaven were sitting contentedly. They were talking with each other. They were obviously full from having had a wonderful meal. And he says, as I came closer, he said, I was amazed to also discover that here so how did they manage to eat? Well, he says, as I watched, one man picked up his spoon, dug it into the dish before him. And the rabbi said, I finally got it. And when my father told me the story, I too said, like boom, light bulbs goes on in the head, right? I finally got it. Heaven and hell, two opposites, offer the same circumstances and the same conditions. The critical difference lies in the way that people treat each other. Thank you very much. So, now, we have actually a couple minutes for questions, or for comments, or ideas. There are no right answers, there are no wrong answers, there are just questions and thoughts. Anybody have any questions about me personally, or about what we've done here today? You have one? You have such a beautiful smile. I thought, oh yeah, you. You have a question? Come on. Question? Wow. My friend that I told you about, his name's also Mohammed. Same thing. Wow. Oh yeah, that's why. Undeniably, that's why. Great. Anybody else? Thoughts, ideas, questions? Come on, don't be shy. Yes. What's your name again? We talked already, right?
Yeah, Armin.
Armin! I told you I have a friend, Armin. I have lots of friends.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, you know your friend from high school?
Yeah.
After he said those words, right? Did people stop actually being racist to you?
Oh, wow, what a good question. Yes and no. Okay, the guy, Michael, that I talked about, that was the instigator. He remained a bigot, probably to this very day. He is who he is. A couple of the kids in the class actually came up to me and apologized. Others said nothing at all. But it never happened again. Ever, ever. It never happened again. And because, I know this kind of sounds weird, but maybe it isn't, because you guys are in high school, you might get this. Because this guy, Peter Zwolski, who was like, really liked by everybody, because he embraced me, I became like an accepted person at high school. I was no longer a loner. I know it's kind of weird that it kind of took that, but that's a great question. Musicals, I was no longer afraid. So think about this, right? Peter Zwolski did just what he thought was the right thing to do. And by doing that, he changed one person's life. And we have a saying, I think that it's a similar saying in Islam and other religious traditions, that he who saves one life, it is as though he has saved an entire generation. Because what Peter did was he made me a stronger person. And I was able to give that strength to my children. And my children will give that strength to their children. And that's what one person can do. So when we talk about today, and I noticed when Rachel had asked you, how many of you here feel you can do in schools? Only a few of you put up your hands. Because I know that you feel it. For it. If you see a friend who's being victimized, stand with the victim against victimizers and say something. My father used to say, you want to get something done, you got to open the mouth. That's what it's all about. Pass back to Rachel. Okay, guys, you were great. I really appreciate you being here and talking about it.
We're going to close similarly to the way we opened. So I'm going to say a few things, and if you agree, raise your hand. And as Bernie mentioned, at the Mosaic Institute, what we do is dialogue. So part of dialogue is getting feedback, and that's what this is about. So I want to know if any of you had what we call an aha moment during this session. Something that you thought, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about. Did anybody have a moment like that while we were speaking? Thank you. Stand in solidarity with people who might be targeted, might be experiencing life a little bit differently than you. Thank you. You can put your hands down. And lastly, just very simply, how many of you learned something new today? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for being here for this workshop.
You